Have you ever wondered how a man, flawed and cunning, could become the cornerstone of a nation chosen by God? Picture a dusty road under a blazing sun, a young man fleeing for his life, his heart pounding with fear and ambition. This is the story of Jacob, a man whose life was a tapestry of deception, redemption, and divine encounters. His journey is about to surprise you, for it's not just a tale of one man's struggles, but a testament to how God weaves his purposes through the most unlikely of souls. Welcome to the Sacred Chronicle, where we uncover the timeless stories of faith that shape our understanding of the divine. Jacob's life is a mirror held up to humanity. Imperfect, scheming, yet chosen for greatness. Born into a family marked by promise, he navigated a world of rivalry, betrayal, and divine intervention. From grasping his brother's heel at birth to wrestling with an angel under a starlit sky, Jacob's story challenges our ideas of justice and mercy. It shows us that God's plans unfold not through perfect heroes, but through those who dare to wrestle with their flaws and seek his grace. This is a saga of a man who fought with God and emerged transformed, laying the foundation for a nation that would carry God's covenant to the world. As we embark on this journey through Jacob's life, prepare to walk the rugged hills of Canaan, feel the tension of family feuds, and witness the quiet moments where heaven touches earth. His story is divided into stages, each one a chapter in a divine narrative that reveals the complexity of faith and the power of redemption. From the prophecy of his birth to the trials of his final years, Jacob's life is a reminder that God's promises endure, even through our mistakes. So, settle in, let the worries of the day fade, and let this story carry you into a world where faith meets human frailty. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll ask God to bring all the good things into your life. Now, let's step into the ancient world of Canaan, where a young couple, Isaac and Rebekah, awaited a miracle that would change the course of history. Their struggle, their hope, and the prophecy of two nations set the stage for Jacob's unbelievable journey. Can you imagine a home filled with hope, yet shadowed by years of unanswered prayers? Isaac, the son of Abraham, was no stranger to miracles. His own birth had been a testament to God's faithfulness, born to Sarah in her old age against all odds. Now, as a man of faith, he faced a new trial. His beloved wife Rebekah was barren. Day after day, the couple prayed, their voices rising like incense to the heavens, pleading for a child to carry forward the covenant God had made with Abraham. The promise of a great nation seemed to hang in the balance. Fragile as a desert flower, Isaac trusted, his prayers steadfast, his heart anchored to God who had spared him on Mount Moriah. Rebekah, with her quiet strength and fierce devotion, stood by his side, her hope unwavering despite the silent years. Then, at last, a miracle stirred. Rebekah felt life within her, a fluttering promise that filled their tent with joy. But this was no ordinary pregnancy. As the months passed, her womb became a battleground, the twins within her jostling with such force that she cried out in pain and confusion. The movements were relentless, as if two forces clashed within her, each vying for dominance. In her distress, Rebekah turned to God, her heart heavy with questions. "Why is this happening to me?" she asked, seeking answers in the quiet of prayer. The Lord's response was as clear as it was astonishing. "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you will be separated. One will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." Imagine the weight of those words settling over Rebekah like a mantle. Two nations, the older serving the younger? This was no mere prophecy about children. It was a divine decree that would shape generations, a revelation that pulsed with destiny. Rebekah carried not just twins, but the seeds of conflict and promise, a future where God's plans would unfold in ways no one could yet fully grasp. As her pregnancy neared its end, the tension grew, each kick a reminder of the struggle foretold. When the time came, the birth was as dramatic as the prophecy. The first child emerged red and covered in hair, a robust boy who seemed born for the wild. They named him Esau, a name that echoed the rugged earth from which he came. But the delivery wasn't over. Another child followed, his tiny hand grasping Esau's heel, as if determined not to be left behind. They called him Jacob, meaning he who grasps the heel, or, some might whisper, the supplanter. Even at birth, Jacob seemed to embody ambition, a quiet determination that would define his life. Picture the scene, a tent glowing with lamplight, the cries of newborns mingling with Rebekah's weary relief and Isaac's grateful prayers. Two boys, so different from the start, lay in their mother's arms. Esau, with his ruddy complexion and wild spirit, was the image of a hunter, his eyes already seeking the horizon. Jacob, smaller and quieter, clung close, his gaze sharp and thoughtful. The prophecy hung over them like a desert breeze, unseen but ever present, whispering of destinies that would clash and intertwine. The parents could not yet know the full scope of God's words, but the seeds of rivalry were already sown, rooted in the very names of their sons. As the boys grew, their differences became stark. Esau roamed the field, his bow in hand, tracking game under the blazing sun, his laughter loud and carefree. Jacob preferred the shade of the tent, his hands busy with domestic tasks, his mind sharp and calculating. The family, once united by the joy of their birth, began to fracture under the weight of favoritism. Isaac, drawn to Esau's strength and the savory game he brought home, poured his affection into his firstborn. Rebekah, however, saw something in Jacob, perhaps the echo of God's prophecy, and her love for him grew fierce and protective. This division, subtle at first, would soon cast long shadows over their lives. The prophecy of the twins was more than promise. It was a challenge, a divine riddle that would test faith, loyalty, and the very meaning of family. The words, "the older will serve the younger," lingered, a quiet drumbeat beneath their every step. What did it mean for a younger brother to rise above the firstborn? How would God's plan unfold through two boys so different, yet bound by blood and destiny? The stage was set for a moment of impulsiveness and cunning that would shift the course of their lives forever. Esau and Jacob, the twin sons of Isaac and Rebekah, could not have been more different. Esau was a man of the wild, his skin bronzed by the sun, his hands calloused from the bow. He roamed the open fields, chasing deer and antelope, his laughter carrying across the valleys. His hair, red as the earth, and his rugged frame made him a favorite of his father, Isaac, who savored the game Esau brought home. The old patriarch's eyes would light up at the scent of roasted venison, a bond forged over shared meals and tales of the hunt. Esau was impulsive, living for the moment, his heart as open as the plains he loved. Jacob, on the other hand, was a man of the tents. Quieter, more deliberate, he moved with a thoughtful grace, his eyes always watching, his mind always turning. Where Esau thrived in the chaos of the hunt, Jacob found comfort in the order of the camp, tending to the flocks or stirring a pot over the fire. His hands were steady, his words measured, but beneath his calm exterior lay a cunning spirit, one that saw opportunities where others saw routine. Rebekah, his mother, saw in him the promise of God's prophecy, and her love for him was fierce, a quiet force that shaped his path. The family's harmony, fragile from the start, began to crack under the weight of favoritism. Isaac's heart leaned toward Esau, the firstborn, the son who mirrored his own love for the land's bounty. Rebekah, however, clung to Jacob, her faith stirred by the divine word she had received. The older will serve the younger. This division was like a fault line running through their home, unseen but ready to split wide open. The twins, now young men, carried their parents' affections like badges, each unaware of how deeply this favoritism would shape their fates. One day, the air thick with the heat of late afternoon, Esau returned from the fields, his body weary and his stomach hollow. The hunt had been fruitless, the sun relentless, and hunger gnawed at him like a wolf. As he approached the camp, the scent of lentil stew wafted from Jacob's fire, rich and earthy, a promise of relief. Jacob sat by the pot, stirring slowly, his eyes catching the glint of Esau's exhaustion. The moment was ripe, and Jacob, ever the opportunist, saw a chance to shift the course of destiny. "Give me some of that red stew," Esau demanded, his voice rough with hunger. "I'm starving." His words were blunt, his need raw. To him, the stew was life itself in that moment, a simple answer to a primal urge. But Jacob's response was anything but simple. "First, sell me your birthright," he said, his voice steady, his gaze unwavering. The words hung in the air, sharp as a blade. The birthright, the sacred inheritance of firstborn, carrying a family's wealth, leadership, and God's covenant, was no small thing. It was the promise of Abraham, passed to Isaac, and meant for the eldest son. Esau, his hunger clouding his judgment, scoffed. "I'm about to die. What good is a birthright to me?" His words were reckless, born of a moment's desperation. To him, the future was distant, the birthright abstract, while the stew was real, warm, and immediate. Jacob presses advantage, his voice calm but insistent. Swear to me first. Esau, driven by his body's demands, swore an oath, trading his birthright for a bowl of lentil stew and a piece of bread. He ate, drank, and rose, brushing the dust from his hands, then walked away without a backward glance. Picture that scene. Jacob, sitting by the fire, the empty bowl at his feet, his heart racing with the weight of what he'd gained. Esau, his hunger sated, striding back to the fields, unaware of the gravity of his choice. The stew, red as Esau's hair, had been more than a meal. It was a transaction that shifted the divine promise. Jacob, the younger, now held the birthright, a step closer to fulfilling the prophecy his mother cherished. But at what cost? The act was not just cunning. It was a fracture, a moment that would deepen the rift between brothers. The birthright's significance went beyond wealth or status. It was a spiritual mantle, the right to lead the family and inherit God's covenant with Abraham, a promise of land, descendants, and blessing. Esau's impulsiveness had cost him dearly, while Jacob's calculation had won him a prize he barely understood. The camp, bathed in the golden light of dusk, seemed unchanged, but the air was heavier now, charged with the consequences of a single meal. The prophecy was unfolding, but its path was fraught with tension, and the brothers' lives would never be the same. Isaac, now old and nearly blind, felt the shadow of mortality creeping closer. His body, once strong from years of tending flocks under Canaanite sun, had grown frail, his vision reduced to a blur of shapes and shadows. Yet his heart was set on fulfilling his role as patriarch, to bestow the blessing of the firstborn upon his beloved Esau. The blessing was no mere formality. It was a sacred act, a divine endowment that carried the weight of God's covenant with Abraham, promises of land, prosperity, and a lineage that would bless all nations. Isaac called for Esau, his voice steady despite his weakened frame. "My son," he said, "go hunt some game, prepare the savory dish I love, and then I will bless you before I die." Esau, ever the dutiful hunter, nodded and strode into the wilderness, his bow slung over his shoulder, his steps sure and swift. The fields of Canaan, dusted with the golden light of dawn, welcomed him as they always had. He moved with purpose, unaware that his absence would open the door to a scheme that would shatter his world. Back in the tent, Rebekah overheard Isaac's words, her heart quickening. The prophecy she had received years ago, "The older will serve the younger," echoed in her mind like a sacred refrain. She believed Jacob, not Esau, was destined to carry the covenant, and she would not let this moment pass. Rebekah's love for Jacob was fierce, a mother's devotion intertwined with faith in God's word. She found her younger son near the flocks, his hands dusty from the day's work, his eyes sharp as ever. "Listen carefully," she whispered, her voice low but urgent. She recounted Isaac's plan and laid out a daring strategy. Jacob would disguise himself as Esau to receive the blessing. Jacob hesitated, his mind racing. "Esau is a hairy man, and I am smooth-skinned," he said, his voice tinged with doubt. "What if father touches me? He'll know I'm not Esau, and I'll bring a curse on myself, not a blessing." But Rebekah was resolute. "Let the curse fall on me," she said, her eyes burning with determination. "Do as I say." The plan was meticulous, born of a mother's cunning and a desperate faith. Rebekah dressed Jacob in Esau's finest clothes, the ones that carried the scent of fields, of sweat and earth. She took goatskins, still warm from the slaughter, and wrapped them around Jacob's arms and neck, their coarse texture mimicking Esau's hairy skin. She placed a dish of savory goat meat, seasoned with herbs and cooked perfection, in his hands. Jacob, his heart pounding, stepped into the dimly lit tent where Isaac waited. The air was thick with tension, the flickering lamplight casting shadows that danced like specters on the woven walls. "Father," Jacob called, his voice trembling slightly as he tried to mimic Esau's rough tone. Isaac stirred, his blind eyes searching the air. "Who are you, my son?" he asked, his voice cautious. "I am Esau, your firstborn," Jacob replied, the lie heavy on his tongue. "I've done as you asked. Sit up, eat, and bless me." Isaac's brow furrowed, suspicion creeping into his weathered face. "How did you find game so quickly?" he asked. Jacob, steadying himself, answered, "The Lord your God granted me success." The words felt like a betrayal, yet they flowed smoothly, a testament to his growing boldness. Isaac beckoned him closer. Come near, let me touch you, my son, to know if you are really Esau. Jacob approached, his breath shallow, as Isaac's trembling hands felt the goatskins on his arms. The voice is the voice of Jacob, Isaac murmured, doubt lingering. But the hands are the hands of Esau. The scent of Esau's clothes, the texture of the skins, and the savory dish in Jacob's hands wove a convincing illusion. Satisfied, Isaac ate the meal, his senses lulled by familiarity. Then, in a moment heavy with destiny, he called Jacob closer. "Come, kiss me, my son," he said, and as Jacob leaned in, Isaac breathed in the scent of the fields, sealing his trust. Isaac raised his hands, his voice resonant with the weight of the covenant. "May God give you the dew of heaven and the richness of the earth, an abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you, and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow to you. Cursed be those who curse you, and blessed be those who bless you." The words, sacred and binding, settled over Jacob like a mantle, their power undeniable. Jacob slipped from the tent, his heart racing, the blessing his, but at a cost he could not yet fathom. Moments later, Esau returned, his arms laden with game, his face flushed with the thrill of the hunt. He prepared the dish his father loved and entered the tent, his voice hearty. "Father, sit up and eat, so you may bless me." Isaac's body stiffened, a chill running through him. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I am Esau, your firstborn," came the reply. The truth crashed over Isaac like a wave, his body shaking with realization. "Who is it, then, that brought me food and received the blessing?" he cried. Esau's face drained the color, and a loud, bitter cry tore from his throat, a wail of anguish that echoed through the camp. "Bless me too, father," he pleaded, his voice breaking. Isaac, his heart heavy, explained the irreversible nature of the blessing. "Your brother came with deceit and took your blessing," he said, his words faltering. Esau wept, his grief raw and uncontainable. "Do you have only one blessing, father?" he begged. Isaac, moved by his son's pain, offered a secondary blessing, but it was a shadow of the first. "You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will break his yoke from your neck." The words were a promise of struggle, a life of conflict rather than dominion. Esau's sorrow turned to rage, his heart hardening against Jacob. "When my father dies," he vowed to himself, "I will kill my brother." The words, whispered in the heat of betrayal, reached Rebekah's ears through the whispers of the camp. Her protective instincts flared, and she knew Jacob could not stay. The blessing, though secured, had torn the family apart, setting the stage for a journey that would test Jacob's faith and force him to face the consequences of his deception. The air in Canaan was heavy with tension, the once quiet camp now a crucible of betrayal and rage. Jacob, his heart still racing from the stolen blessing, stood on the edge of his father's tent, the weight of his actions pressing down like the midday sun. Esau's vow to kill him had spread through the camp like wildfire, whispered from servant to servant until it reached Rebekah's ears. Her protective instincts, sharp as a shepherd's blade, drove her to act. She called Jacob to her side, her voice low and urgent. "Your brother Esau is planning to kill you," she said, her eyes searching his. "You must flee to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay there until Esau's anger cools." Jacob nodded, his mind a storm of fear and guilt, knowing that his cunning had set this path in motion. Rebekah, ever the strategist, approached Isaac with a different pretext. "I'm weary of these Hittite women," she said, her voice heavy with feigned exasperation. "If Jacob marries one of them, what good is my life?" Isaac, unaware of Esau's murderous intent, agreed to send Jacob to Haran to find a wife from Rebekah's family. He called for his younger son, his hands trembling not from age but from the recent upheaval. "Go to Paddan Aram, to the house of your mother's father," Isaac said, his voice steady with purpose. "Take a wife from the daughters of Laban. May God Almighty bless you, make you fruitful, and increase your numbers until you become a community of peoples." This blessing, given knowingly, echoed the covenant of Abraham, a mantle Jacob now carried, though stained by deceit. With a bundle of provisions and his father's blessing, Jacob set out alone, the dusty trails of Canaan stretching before him. The journey to Haran was long, hundreds of miles across rugged hills and arid plains, each step a reminder of the home he'd left behind. The sun beat down. The wind carried the scent of wild thyme, and Jacob's heart wrestled with the cost of his actions. He was no longer just a cunning son. He was a fugitive, driven from his family by his own schemes. Yet, beneath the fear, a flicker of hope stirred. Perhaps this journey would lead not just to safety, but to something greater. As night fell on the first leg of his journey, Jacob stopped in a desolate place, the ground hard and unyielding, with no tent or company. He chose a smooth stone for a pillow and lay down under a sky ablaze with stars. Exhaustion overtook him, and as he slept, the heavens opened in a way he could never have imagined. In his dream, a stairway stretched from the earth to the sky, its steps gleaming like polished bronze. Angels, radiant and purposeful, ascended and descended, their movements a silent symphony of divine activity. Above the stairway stood the Lord, his presence overwhelming yet intimate, his voice resonating through the stillness. "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac," he said, his words carrying the weight of eternity. "The land on which you lie I will give to you and your descendants. Your offspring will be like the dust of the earth, spreading out to the west, east, north, and south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised." The promise, first given to Abraham, then Isaac, now rested on Jacob, a fugitive who had grasped for greatness and found himself alone. Jacob awoke, his heart pounding, the stone beneath his head now sacred. "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it," he whispered, his voice trembling with awe. Fear and wonder mingled as he realized the magnitude of what he'd seen. This was no ordinary dream. It was a divine encounter, a moment where heaven touched earth. He rose, his body stiff from the cold ground, and set the stone upright as a pillar, pouring oil over it in a simple act of worship. "This place shall be called Bethel, the house of God," he declared, his voice steady with newfound reverence. He made a vow, his first true step toward faith. "If God will be with me and watch over me, then the Lord will be my God, and this stone will be God's house, and of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth." The dawn broke over Bethel, painting the hills in hues of gold and rose. Jacob stood by the anointed stone, his eyes tracing the path to Haran. The vision had changed him, planting a seed of faith in a heart once ruled by cunning. He was still Jacob, the supplanter, but now he carried a promise that was both a gift and a burden. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges he could not yet foresee, but the God who met him in the wilderness had promised to be with him. With a deep breath, Jacob shouldered his bundle and continued his journey, the echo of angels' footsteps lingering in his soul. The road to Haran stretched long and unforgiving, a ribbon of dust and stone winding through hills and valleys under a relentless sun. Jacob, his heart still stirred by the vision at Bethel, carried the weight of God's promise like a hidden treasure. His feet, blistered from days of walking, moved steadily toward the land of his mother's kin, where safety and a new life awaited. The air was thick with the scent of dry grass and distant water, and as he crested a hill, he saw a well in the valley below, its stone cover surrounded by shepherds and their flocks. Among them stood a young woman, her eyes bright and her movements graceful, tending to her father's sheep. Jacob's heart quickened, sensing this moment was no accident. He approached the well, his voice steady despite his weariness. "Where are you from, my brothers?" he asked the shepherds. "From Haran," they replied, pointing to the woman. "That's Rachel, daughter of Laban." The name struck Jacob like a chord. Laban, his mother's brother. He stepped forward, offering to water Rachel's flock, and with a strength born of purpose, he rolled a heavy stone from the well's mouth. As the sheep drank, he spoke with Rachel, his words tumbling out in a rush. "I am Jacob, son of Rebekah, your father's sister." Rachel's eyes widened, and she ran to tell Laban, who welcomed Jacob into his home with open arms, the warmth of family easing the sting of his exile. Laban's household was a bustling place, filled with the bleating of sheep and the chatter of kin. Jacob, grateful for refuge, offered to work for his uncle. Laban, seeing the young man skilled with the flocks, agreed, and asked what wages Jacob desired. Jacob's gaze turned to Rachel, her beauty and spirit alight in his weary heart. "I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter," he said, his voice firm with resolve. Laban nodded, a glint in his eye that Jacob, in his love-struck haze, did not notice. The agreement was sealed, and Jacob labored under the Haran's sun, each day a step closer to Rachel, his love growing with every season. The years passed like a dream, the labor sweetened by the thought of Rachel. Jacob tended Laban's flocks with care, his hands deft and his mind sharp, turning the herds into a thriving enterprise. But when the 7 years were fulfilled, Laban's true nature emerged. On the wedding night, under the cover of darkness and a haze of celebration, Laban gave Jacob his elder daughter Leah instead of Rachel. Leah, with her gentle eyes and quiet demeanor, was veiled, and Jacob, caught in the joy of the moment, did not see the deception until dawn. The irony was bitter. Jacob, the supplanter, had been deceived. His own cunning mirrored back at him. Anger flared in Jacob's heart, but Laban was unyielding. "It is not our custom to give a younger daughter before the elder," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "Complete Leah's bridal week, and I will give you Rachel, too, for another 7 years of service." Jacob, his love for Rachel undimmed, agreed, though the sting of betrayal lingered. He married Rachel a week later, his heart torn between the sisters. Leah, now his wife, longed for his affection, but Jacob's eyes were for Rachel alone, a division that would sow seeds of rivalry. The years that followed were marked by the clamor of a growing family and the tension between Leah and Rachel. Leah, unloved but fertile, bore Jacob 4 sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Each birth was a cry for Jacob's love, her voice naming the children with hope and sorrow. Rachel, barren and desperate, grew envious, her heart aching as Leah's tent filled with laughter. In her anguish, Rachel gave Jacob her servant Bilhah, who bore 2 sons, Dan and Naphtali. Leah, not to be outdone, offered her servant Zilpah, who bore Gad and Asher. The rivalry intensified, a silent battle waged to the children they bore, until Rachel at last gave birth to Joseph, her joy a fleeting triumph. Jacob's wealth grew alongside his family, his skill turning Laban's flocks into a vast enterprise. But Laban's sons, envious of Jacob's prosperity, whispered against him, their resentment a growing shadow. Laban's favor soured, his face no longer warm but calculating. Jacob sensed a shift, his instincts honed by years of survival. Then, in a quiet moment, God spoke to him. "Return to the land of your fathers, and I will be with you." The command was clear, a call to leave Haran and face the past he had fled. Jacob gathered Rachel and Leah, sharing God's words and his plan to depart. The sisters, weary of their father's schemes, agreed, and Jacob prepared to leave in secret. Under the cover of night, Jacob gathered his wives, children, and flocks, slipping away while Laban was shearing his sheep. Unbeknownst to Jacob, Rachel stole her father's household gods, small idols that held value in Laban's home, perhaps as a final act of defiance. The family moved swiftly, the dust of Haran rising behind them. But Laban, learning of their flight, pursued with his men, his anger a storm on the horizon. On the 7th day, he overtook Jacob in the hills of Gilead, his voice sharp with accusation. "Why did you steal my gods?" he demanded. Searching the tents, but finding nothing, Rachel, cunning as a husband, had hidden the idols in her camel's saddle and sat upon them. God had warned Laban in a dream not to harm Jacob. And so, after a heated exchange, the 2 men made a covenant. They piled stones into a heap, a witness to their truce, and shared a meal under the stars. Laban blessed his daughters and grandchildren, his voice heavy with resignation, then turned back to Haran. Jacob stood by the stone heap, the weight of his years in Haran lifting, yet the road ahead loomed with new challenges, chief among them, the brother he had betrayed. The hills of Gilead faded behind Jacob as he led his family toward Canaan, the land of his birth now a distant promise on the horizon. His flocks trailed like a living river, his wives and children riding camels laden with the wealth of Haran. Yet peace eluded him. The shadow of Esau loomed large, his brother's vow of vengeance a specter that haunted his steps. 20 years had passed since Jacob fled, but the memory of the stolen blessing burned fresh. As they neared the border, Jacob's heart raced with uncertainty. He sent messengers ahead to Seir, Esau's land, with words of humility. "Your servant Jacob says, I have sojourned with Laban and now return with flocks and family. I hope to find favor in your sight." The messengers returned, their faces grave. "Esau is coming to meet you," they said, "with 400 men." Jacob's blood ran cold. 400 men could mean an army, a force bent on retribution. Fear gripped him, and he divided his camp into two, reasoning that if Esau attacked one, the other might escape. In the quiet of the night, Jacob turned to God, his voice a fervent prayer under the stars. "O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac," he pleaded, "you who said to me, 'Return to your country, I am unworthy of your kindness. Deliver me from Esau, for I fear he will attack me, the mothers with the children.'" His words were raw, a blend of gratitude and desperation, echoing the vow he made at Bethel. To appease Esau, Jacob prepared a lavish gift: goats, sheep, camels, cows, and donkeys, arranged in droves with instructions of servants. "When Esau meets you," he said, "tell him these belong to your servant Jacob, a gift from my lord Esau, who follows behind." The drove set out, a procession of reconciliation, while Jacob stayed back with his family, his mind churning with plans. As night deepened, he sent his wives, servants, and 11 sons across the Jabbok ford, leaving him alone in the darkness. The river murmured softly, the air cool and still, but Jacob's solitude was shattered by a mysterious figure, a man who wrestled with him until dawn. The struggle was fierce, muscles straining, breaths ragged in the night. Jacob, no stranger to conflict, held his own, his grip unyielding despite exhaustion. As the first light crept over the horizon, the man touched Jacob's hip socket, wrenching it out of joint with a surge of supernatural power. Pain shot through Jacob, but he clung tighter. "Let me go, for the day is broken," the man said. Jacob, gasping, replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked his name, and Jacob answered. "No longer shall your name be Jacob," the man declared, "but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." Jacob, awestruck, asked for the man's name, but received only a question in return. Then the man blessed him and vanished. Jacob rose, limping from his dislocated hip, his body marked by the encounter. "I have seen God face to face," he whispered, naming the place Peniel, "and yet my life has been delivered." The sun rose as he crossed the ford, his family waiting, unaware of the divine struggle that had transformed him. Now Israel, he who struggles with God, he embodied the nation's future, a people defined by wrestling with the divine. Ahead, Esau approached with his 400 men, the dust of their advance rising like a storm cloud. Jacob arranged his family carefully, the servants and their children first, then Leah and hers, with Rachel and Joseph at the rear. He went ahead, bowing 7 times as he neared Esau, his humility a shield against wrath. Esau, his red hair catching the light, ran to meet him, embracing Jacob with tears. They wept together, the years of bitterness dissolving in that moment. "Who are these with you?" Esau asked, his voice warm. Jacob introduced his family, and they bowed. Esau glanced at the droves. "What do you mean by all this company?" Jacob replied, "To find favor in your sight." Esau, his heart softened, insisted he keep the gifts, but Jacob urged him to accept, seeing Esau's face like the face of God. The brothers reconciled, but Jacob, cautious, declined to travel with Esau to Seir. "My children are young and the flocks tender," he said. Esau offered men to escort them, but Jacob demurred. They parted amicably, Esau heading south, while Jacob journeyed to Sukkot, building booths for his livestock. From there, he moved to Shechem in Canaan, buying land and pitching his tent. He built an altar, naming it El Elohe Israel, God, the God of Israel, a testament to his transformation and God's faithfulness. The land of Shechem stretched before Jacob's tent, a fertile plain where his flocks grazed under the watchful eyes of his sons. The air carried the scent of cedar and wildflowers, and the camp buzzed with the rhythm of a growing family. Jacob, now Israel, had settled into the land God promised, His heart anchored by the altar he named El Elo Israel. Yet peace was fragile, like a thin thread stretched taut. His daughter Dinah, born to Leah, was growing into a young woman, curious and bold, drawn to the life beyond the camp. She ventured into Shechem to see the daughters of the land, unaware that her presence would spark a tragedy. Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, prince of the region, saw Dinah and was captivated. His desire overpowered his honor, and he took her, violating her in an act that sent ripples of outrage through Jacob's family. Shechem's heart, however, turned to love, and he pleaded with his father to secure Dinah as his wife. Hamor approached Jacob, offering a marriage alliance and trade between their peoples. "Let Dinah marry my son," he said, standing before Jacob's tent, his voice smooth with diplomacy. "Give us your daughters, and take ours, and dwell among us." Jacob, his face unreadable, heard the proposal, but his sons, burning with anger, listened from the shadows. Simeon and Levi, Dinah's full brothers, were consumed by fury at their sister's disgrace. They joined their brothers in a deceptive response, their words cloaked in cunning that echoed their father's younger days. "We cannot give our sister to an uncircumcised man," they said, their voices steady. "But if every male among you is circumcised, we will agree to the alliance." Hamor and Shechem, eager to secure the deal, agreed, convincing their city's men to undergo the ritual. The men of Shechem complied, trusting the pact, their bodies sore and vulnerable in the days that followed. On the third day, when the men were still in pain, Simeon and Levi struck. Swords in hand, they entered the city, their steps silent but their intent lethal. They killed Hamor, Shechem, and every male, sparing none. They took Dinah from Shechem's house, plundered the city, and seized livestock, wealth, and captives. The violence was swift, a storm of vengeance that left the plain of Shechem silent and blood-stained. When Jacob learned of their actions, his heart sank. "You have brought trouble on me," he said, his voice heavy with fear. "We are few, and the Canaanites and Perizzites may unite against us." Simeon and Levi, unrepentant, replied, "Should we let our sister be treated like a harlot?" The weight of their actions hung over the camp like a storm cloud, and Jacob, sensing danger, turned to God. In a quiet moment, the Lord spoke, "Go up to Bethel and dwell there. Build an altar to God who appeared to you when you fled from Esau." Jacob obeyed, calling his household to purify themselves and cast aside foreign gods. Rachel's stolen idols, hidden until now, were buried beneath an oak near Shechem, a symbolic shedding of the past. The family journeyed to Bethel, and as they went, God's presence surrounded them, a divine shield that kept the surrounding peoples at bay. At Bethel, Jacob built an altar, the stone pillar from his vision years ago, now joined by a place of worship, a testament to God's enduring promise. There, God appeared again, his voice resonating through the sacred place. "Your name is Jacob, but you shall be called Israel," he said, reaffirming the name given at Peniel. "I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall descend from you. The land I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I give to you and your offspring." The words renewed the covenant, anchoring Jacob's faith amid the turmoil. He poured oil and wine over the altar, naming the place Bethel once more, a house of God where heaven and earth met. But the journey from Bethel brought sorrow. As the family traveled south, Rachel went into labor, her cries piercing the quiet of the road. The birth was grueling, and the midwife's voice was both joy and warning. "You have a son." Rachel, her strength fading, named him Benoni, son of my sorrow, but Jacob called him Benjamin, son of my right hand. Rachel's life slipped away, her breath stilled under the wide Canaanite sky. Jacob buried her near Bethlehem, marking her grave with a pillar that stood as a silent witness to his grief. The camp mourned, the weight of loss settling over them like dust. Jacob pressed on, leading his family to Hebron, where his father Isaac dwelt. The years had etched deep lines into Isaac's face, his body frail, but his spirit enduring. Father and son reunited, their bond a quiet comfort after years apart. Isaac, who had once nearly sacrificed his life on an altar, now faced the end of his days. When he died at 180, Jacob and Esau came together to bury him in the cave of Machpelah, alongside Abraham and Sarah. The brothers, once divided by betrayal, stood side by side, their hands working in unison to honor their father. The act was a silent testament to their reconciliation, a moment of unity in a family marked by strife. Jacob settled in Hebron, his 12 sons growing strong around him, their voices filling the camp with life. The land of Canaan, promised to his fathers, was now his home, but its peace was fleeting, shaped by the choices of his sons and the weight of God's covenant. In the rolling hills of Hebron, where the air was thick with the scent of olive groves and the bleating of flocks, Jacob's camp thrived under the Canaanite sun. His 12 sons, each as distinct as the stars, filled his life with the promise of a great nation. Yet one among them shone brightest in his heart. Joseph, born to Rachel, was a boy of 17, his eyes alight with dreams and his spirit unburdened by the rivalries of his brothers. Jacob's love for him was unguarded, a father's pride woven into the ornate robe he crafted for his son, its colors shimmering like a tapestry of favor. But this love, so openly displayed, stirred a shadow of envy among the others, their whispers growing sharp as thorns. Joseph, unaware of the brewing storm, shared dreams that stirred both wonder and resentment. "We were binding sheaves in the field," he told his brothers, his voice bright with conviction, "and my sheaf stood upright while yours bowed to it." The words hung heavy, their meaning clear to men who valued honor and birthright. Another dream followed. "The sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed to me." Even Jacob, hearing this, rebuked him, though his heart pondered the vision. The brothers' jealousy festered, their glances cold as they tended the flocks. The robe, a symbol of favor, became a target for their anger, its vibrant hues a constant reminder of their father's preference. One day, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers, who were grazing the flocks near Shechem. The journey was long, the path winding through dusty trails, but Joseph pressed on, the robe catching the light as he went. When his brothers saw him approaching, their resentment boiled over. "Here comes a dreamer," they mocked, their voices laced with scorn. "Let's kill him and throw him into a pit, and see what becomes of his dreams." Reuben, the eldest, intervened, his conscience stirred. "Shed no blood," he urged. "Put him in the pit, but do not harm him." His plan was to rescue Joseph later, but the others agreed, stripping the robe from Joseph's back and casting him into a dry cistern, its walls cold and unyielding. As they sat to eat, a caravan of Ishmaelite traders appeared, their camels laden with spices bound for Egypt. Judah, seeing an opportunity, proposed a different plan. "What profit is it to kill our brother?" he said. "Let's sell him, and let our hands be clean." The brothers agreed, pulling Joseph from the pit and selling him for 20 shekels of silver. The traders bound him, and as the caravan moved toward Egypt, Joseph's cries faded into the desert. To cover their deed, the brothers slaughtered a goat, dipping the ornate robe in its blood. They returned to Jacob, presenting the torn, crimson-stained garment. "Is this your son's robe?" they asked, their faces masks of false grief. Jacob's heart shattered at the sight. "Joseph has been torn to pieces," he wailed, tearing his clothes and donning sackcloth. His mourning was a storm, his cries echoing to the camp for days, then years. No comfort could reach him. His love for Joseph had been a light, and now it was extinguished. The brothers, bound by their secret, watched their father's grief, their guilt a silent burden. Meanwhile, Joseph, sold into Egypt, became a servant in the house of Potiphar, his dreams buried but not dead, his life now in the hands of a God who had not forgotten him. Years passed, and a famine gripped the land, its claws tightening on Canaan's fields. Jacob's stores dwindled, and he sent his sons to Egypt, where grain was said to be plentiful. "Go, buy food so we may live," he said, his voice weary from years of sorrow. The brothers traveled south, unaware that the man they would face was Joseph, now a powerful governor under Pharaoh, his childhood dreams fulfilled in ways they could not imagine. Joseph recognized them, but they did not know him, his face weathered by years and authority. He tested them, demanding they bring Benjamin, the youngest, to prove their honesty. The brothers returned to Jacob, their words heavy with dread. "The man in Egypt insists we bring Benjamin," they said. Jacob's heart recoiled. "You have bereaved me of my children," he cried. "Joseph is no more, and now you would take Benjamin?" But the famine pressed harder, and Judah, his voice earnest, pledged his life for Benjamin's safety. Reluctantly, Jacob relented, sending gifts and his youngest son. In Egypt, Joseph's heart stirred at the sight of Benjamin, his only full brother. He revealed himself, his voice breaking. "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" The brothers, stunned and fearful, fell before him, their past sins laid bare. Joseph embraced them, tears mingling with forgiveness. "Do not be distressed," he said. "God sent me here to preserve life." He sent them back with carts and provisions, urging them to bring Jacob to Egypt. When the brothers returned, their words tumbled out. "Joseph is alive, and he is ruler over Egypt." Jacob's heart faltered, disbelief warring with hope. But when he saw the carts laden with Egypt's bounty, his spirit revived. "My son Joseph is alive," he whispered. "I will go and see him before I die." God spoke to him in a vision that night. "Do not fear, go to Egypt, for I will make you a great nation there. I will go with you and bring you back." Jacob, now 70 years old, set out with his family, 66 souls in all, their caravan a testament to God's promise. In Egypt, Joseph met them in Goshen, his chariot raising dust as he ran to his father. They embraced, Jacob's tears soaking Joseph's robe, the years of grief melting in that moment. "Now I can die. Having seen your face," Jacob said, his voice thick with joy. Pharaoh welcomed Jacob, granting them fertile land in Goshen. Jacob, standing before the king, blessed him, his weather hands raised in gratitude. For 17 years, Jacob lived in peace, his family thriving under Joseph's care. The famine's grip softened by abundance. As his days drew to a close, Jacob called his sons to his side. His voice, though weak, carried the weight of prophecy. To each, he gave a blessing, his words shaping their futures. To Judah, he promised a scepter, a line of kings culminating in a ruler of nations. To Joseph, he gave a double portion, adopting his sons Ephraim and Manasseh as his own, their tribes to inherit alongside their uncles. Jacob's hands, guided by faith, crossed as he blessed Ephraim over Manasseh, defying tradition to fulfill God's will. He spoke his final wish: "Bury me with my fathers in cave of Machpelah, beside Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, and Leah." Jacob breathed his last at 147, his life a tapestry of struggle and grace. His sons carried his body to Canaan, joined by a great company from Egypt. They buried him in Machpelah, as he had asked, the cave a silent witness to God's covenant. Joseph and his brothers returned to Egypt, their father's legacy a reminder that transformation was possible, that God's faithfulness endured through every trial, weaving a flawed man's life into the foundation of a nation. The cave of Machpelah stood silent under the Canaanite sky, its stone walls cradling the bones of Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, Leah, and now Jacob. The dust of the journey from Egypt had settled, and the mournful procession had returned to Goshen, where Jacob's sons and their families carried on under the shadow of his life. Jacob, once a cunning youth grasping his brother's heel, had become Israel, a man transformed through struggle, deception, and divine encounters. His story, woven through decades of triumphs and trials, was more than a tale of one man. It was a tapestry of faith, flawed and vibrant, that stretched across generations to form the foundation of a chosen nation. Picture the tents of Goshen, where the descendants of Jacob multiplied, their voices mingling with the bleating of flocks under Egypt's wide, starlit sky. Each son, from Reuben to Benjamin, carried a piece of their father's legacy, their tribes destined to shape a people set apart by God. Jacob's life was a paradox, a man who schemed for a birthright yet wrestled with an angel, who fled in fear yet returned to reconcile, who mourned a son he thought dead only to embrace him in a foreign land. His journey was not one of perfection but of persistence, a testament to how God uses the imperfect to fulfill his perfect promises. In the quiet moments of his early years, Jacob learned cunning in the tents of his mother, Rebekah, her fierce love guiding him toward a destiny foretold before his birth. The prophecy, "the older will serve the younger," was no mere prediction. It was a divine thread that pulled him through betrayal and exile. The stolen blessing, secured through goatskins and savory stew, marked him as a deceiver, yet set him on a path where God's voice would break through at Bethel, a stairway to heaven revealing a covenant that refused to let him go. The stars above that sacred stone bore witness to a promise that Jacob, despite his flaws, would carry forward. Haran tested Jacob's heart, turning the deceiver into the deceived. Laban's trickery, giving Leah instead of Rachel, mirrored Jacob's own schemes, teaching him the cost of manipulation. Yet in those years of labor, love, and rivalry, Jacob built a family, his 12 sons a living echo of God's vow to make his offspring like the dust of the earth. The rivalry between Leah and Rachel, painful and raw, bore fruit in children who would become tribes, their names etched into the history of a nation. Even Rachel's stolen idols, buried under an oak, mark a turning point, a shedding of old ways as Jacob embraced a God who met him in the wilderness. The wrestling at Peniel was Jacob's crucible, where a man became Israel, his hip wrench, but his spirit marked by divine encounter. That night, under a sky ablaze with stars, he faced not just a mysterious stranger, but the weight of his past and the hope of his future. The name Israel, he who struggles with God, was more than a title. It was a calling, a reminder that faith is not a straight path, but a struggle, a grappling with divine purpose that leaves one changed. His limp, a permanent reminder, carried him to reconciliation with Esau, a moment of grace where brothers embraced, their tears washing away years of bitterness. The trials that followed, Dinah's violation, Simeon and Levi's vengeance, Rachel's death, tested Jacob's faith, each sorrow a shadow of the promise. Yet God's voice at Bethel, reaffirming the covenant and the birth of Benjamin, a son of sorrow turned to joy, reminded Jacob that even in loss, God's plan endured. His reunion with Isaac, their shared burial of the patriarch, grounded him in the legacy of Abraham, a lineage that stretched beyond the grave. And in Egypt, the embrace of Joseph, once thought dead, was a miracle that crowned Jacob's life with joy, proving that God's faithfulness outlasts even the deepest grief. Joseph's story, woven into Jacob's final years, was a mirror of his father's journey. Sold into slavery, yet rising to power, Joseph embodied the resilience Jacob had learned through decades of struggle. The ornate robe, once stained with goat's blood, became a symbol of restoration as Joseph, ruler of Egypt, welcomed his father into abundance. Jacob's blessings to his sons, spoken with a dying breath, were more than words. They were prophecies shaping the tribes that would inherit Canaan. Judah's scepter, Joseph's double portion, and Ephraim's precedence over Manasseh were acts of faith, trusting God to fulfill what had begun. Jacob's life challenges us to see ourselves in his story. He was no hero in the mold of legend, no flawless saint carved in stone. He was a man who grasped, stumbled, and rose again, his faith forged in the fire of human frailty. His story reminds us that God's purposes do not depend on our perfection, but on our willingness to wrestle, to trust, and to return. The nation of Israel, born from his loins, carried his name in his struggles, a people destined to bless the world through a covenant that endured every betrayal and every tear. As Jacob's body rested in Machpelah, his legacy lived on in the voices of his sons, the laughter of their children, and the promise of a land yet to be fully claimed. His life was a bridge between Abraham's call and the nation that would rise, a story of transformation that speaks to every heart seeking redemption. The stars above Goshen, bright and unyielding, bore witness to a man who fought with God and found grace, a man whose flaws became the canvas for a divine masterpiece. If Jacob's story has moved you or made you think, please share it. It could be just what someone else needs to hear. Jacob's life shows us that change is possible for everyone. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next videos, where we'll explore the stories of other biblical characters and the valuable lessons they teach us. Just as God transformed Jacob's life, he also has a plan for you. See you in the next video.